is happening, everybody? Saturday afternoon, which you guys know what time it is. It's Neil Orfield, Millie Making winner. It's Neil Orfield. Neil won the Millie Maker. Actually, what year was it he won the Millie Maker? And what week, Neil?
Oh, you know that I don't remember the year. I know it was week 7,
You don't know
2020.
the year. It's like, yeah, 1976.
No, it was 2020. Yeah, I got it. It's 2020.
Yeah, so Neil won a Millie Maker in 2020, and it's why we always do this tournament show together. We break down the upcoming slate from a FanDuel and DraftKings perspective. We go position by position. We go through our favorite tournament plays on the slate, and then at the end also, we give out our favorite stacks of the week. And now also we look at the lineup generator to find a lineup generator lineup and see what our data on the site is giving as a prediction for top stack of the week. And all we ask for you guys as you come in, just like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's the easiest way to support us and help keep all of our content free. And I've had some really good shows around here, Neil. I've been very lucky just calling the winning stack in the Millie Maker 3 out of the last 4 weeks here. So a lot of pressure. I have to keep it going to make it 4 out of 5. And if you guys also want to check out Rainmakers over at DraftKings, and they just ran a Millie Maker for Thursday Night Football, there is a link below to get a totally free starters pack for Rainmakers. They sponsor this show, and you get a chance to get some cards for free that you can win actual cash prizes with. Neil, how's your week going? How was Thanksgiving?
Yeah, first of all, I got to say, I wasn't that impressed when you just kept naming the Cowboys over and over. It's like, okay, cool. One trick pony here, Greg. But then last week, nailing the Jaguar stack, that was not all that popular. That was really impressive. So yeah, hopefully you can continue to nail the top stack again this week. Things are good. I have celebrated Thanksgiving 3, maybe 4 times. I don't know if my cousin's Thanksgiving counts as a celebration. Yeah, it has been a very, very busy week. A lot of food involved. The big news is, and I don't know if you and I talked in depth about my weight loss bet, but I would have had to shave my beard if I lost the least percentage of my body fat over a bet that lasted since August, and I did not lose that bet, so don't have to shave my beard, and I feel really good about that. Really relieved. Didn't help that bet ended, and then I celebrated Thanksgiving twice over the next 2 days after the bet, but so I put some back on, but still felt good about that. Excited to talk about this slate. I was thinking it was going to be a short slate with 4 games already gone, but no teams on bye this week. It's kind of just a regular slate.
So, I mean, 10 games is still fairly short for an NFL main slate, but I mean, it's the size of a slate that I really do like. Like, if you ask me, would I rather have a 10-game slate or a 15-game slate or something like that? Like, give me the 10 games. I know we don't actually have, 15-game slates other than, that nonsense that happens in week 18, but we generally have, like 13, 14, 12 games, like somewhere around there. Actually, I really do like 10 quite a bit. So we'll start getting right into it, although we do have some news that broke. I don't know if you saw this morning, Neil, but a little before the show started, and we don't have any kind of real definitive outlook on what's going to end up happening here, but Rachaad White was downgraded to questionable on a Saturday. We don't really often see running backs get downgraded on a Saturday. Now, as of now, he's still in our data right now. But one thing that I think is going to be pretty interesting when we talk about running backs, and I want to get out ahead of it here, is just to bring up that news item that broke shortly before the show started. And so, Neil, I was wondering, did you have any initial reactions or thoughts on Rachaad White being downgraded? Because there's some pretty significant tournament implications.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely makes it seem less likely that he's going to play. Is going to be in a great spot if he does end up playing. The Colts 24th in terms of run DVOA, so will be a great spot for whoever is starting. I think if he's out, maybe I'll have some interest in Chase Edmonds. My guess would be the next man up just based on who they've played. He's the only real Bucs running back who's gotten any kind of run recently. So I think it would be Chase Edmonds if he can't go. But yeah, something we're going to need to monitor it because it is kind of impactful because Rachaad White is going to be in a great spot if he does end up playing. He's been pretty good, like pretty consistent all year and in a great spot here. So if he's playing, Rachaad White's going to be, somebody we're going to have some interest in. And if he's out, we might have to consider Chase Edmonds as well. That is my initial, I haven't given it a ton of thought since it just came out this morning, but that is my instinct is it would be Chase Edmonds if Rachaad White can't go. Do you see it any differently?
I'm going to assume that Rachaad White sits. Like how often, this actually might be the first time the entire year. Can you remember any other week we've had where a running back has gotten from like not being on the injury report to questionable on a Saturday?
Not off the top of my head. Yeah, I can't think of any.
Yeah, there might be
Cam Akers on Sunday.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
There might be one that we're missing, but if there was, like, it wasn't somebody who was all that significant. So I'm going to assume that Rachaad White doesn't play, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the running back spot. But where we're going to start here, Neil, is by talking about the quarterbacks. And I did a sim show yesterday with Spags, and a lot has changed since then that's going to impact my quarterback exposure, most notably. My most rostered quarterback in the lineups that I built out this morning as I was getting ready for the show, both DraftKings and FanDuel, my most rostered quarterback, Neil, is Matthew Stafford. And yesterday, when Spags and I were doing a sim show and kind of running through everything, we were like, hey, let's take Matt Stafford out of the equation because we thought Cooper Kupp wasn't going to play. He was questionable. And we're like, hey, with this team, they're like minus 600 to miss the playoffs. We didn't think it was going to be super likely that this would be a team that would really try to push Cooper Kupp to play. They're really cautious them to open up the season. So we were like, hey, we don't really have a ton of interest in Matthew Stafford if Cooper Kupp is going to be out. And now that Kupp is in, Stafford showing up in a whole bunch of my lineups. So who is your favorite quarterback of the slate? Is it Matthew Stafford? Is it somebody else? And then also, were you kind of caught off guard by Cooper Kupp being named active like 2 days in advance here?
Yeah, I really thought that he was looking likely to miss this game. So it did catch me off guard a little bit that Cooper Kupp is good to go. The Rams clearly stand out like a sore thumb in the top stack tool. 6% projected ownership going to Stafford, 19% chance of being the top stack. I think I would have preferred it with Kupp out, maybe just because I have concerns about his health anyway. Like I'm surprised that he's playing. I'm wondering if he's going to be limited at all. I think that I'm still going to play him in those Ram stacks, but it does make things more complicated that Kupp is in there because we can't just go to, okay, Nakua is the clear number one again. It's back to the, kind of jumbled, okay, they're both maybe 1A, 1B. I've tried several times and it has not worked yet. I've tried several times the double stack with Kupp and Puka Nakua. I think I'll probably try it again this week in some lineups. Just hope that Kupp is good to go and that they're able to finally get it done against this Cardinals defense. But yeah, definitely complicates things a little bit. That Kupp, I was expecting him to miss at least one game. I thought he was probably going to be missing multiple games, and now he's good to go. And I have no idea if he's going to be fully healthy, if he's going to be limited. That complicates things. But the Rams clearly do stand out as the top stack in the top stacks tool. Outside of that, I mean, the Chiefs are up there. The problem with the Chiefs is just there's nobody you want to stack Mahomes with other than Kelsey generally. I guess Justin Watson separated himself from a usage standpoint in the last game, had several drops. I don't know if you watched that game, Greg, but like none of the wide receivers for the Chiefs looked great in that game. So I'd probably just go straight to Mahomes. Kelsey would be another one of my favorite stacks. I do have a lot of interest in the Bills. They actually have negative leverage here in the top stacks tool. It's when I first looked at the slate, that was the team that stood out. It's just the Bills against that Eagles secondary that has not been great this year. I thought they would be, looking like a smash, that they were going to be the chalk. They're not chalky at all. I was also surprised to see that the Bills are only have a 22.75 implied team total. So they don't look quite as great as I expected. But I still do have some interest just because Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, they've been so good this year. That's kind of a contrarian-ish stack that I have some interest in. So yeah, I'd say favorite stack probably I'd probably would just be Mahomes to Kelsey outside of the Rams, and then maybe the Bills. How about you?
So it's funny because we have 4 quarterbacks that are like significantly more expensive than everybody else this weekend. For DraftKings, we have CJ Stroud at 7,700, Josh Allen at 8,100, Mahomes at 82, Jalen Hurts at 8,300. And then over on FanDuel, it's, kind of a similar type thing where we have, let me pull up, I've got all of the games selected. Here we go. So over on FanDuel, we've got Mahomes, Hurts, and Allen way more expensive than everybody else. And then CJ Stroud is $7,700 on FanDuel, but the pricing being a little bit different. There are players grouped around there. Of the pay up options, and I'll include CJ Stroud in this because I kind of feel the same way about him on both DraftKings and FanDuel. I'm only getting to 2 of the pay up quarterbacks, and they are not Josh Allen or CJ Stroud. They are Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes. I'm overweight to both of them. My top 150 lineups had 0 Josh Allen, 0 CJ Stroud, whereas I have double-digit exposure to both Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes. I only have 6 quarterbacks that I have exposure to in my top lineups. And yeah, Hurts and Mahomes are 2 of them. So if I'm paying up the QB, that's where I'm going. I'm going to Jalen Hurts. I'm going to Patrick Mahomes. If you're going to Mahomes, we talk about this all the time. It's super hard to know which wide receiver you're going to pair him with, but you want to get him in there with Travis Kelce. And then as for Jalen Hurts, it's mostly going to be A.J. Brown, but you could also mix in Devontae Smith in there as well as somebody who's showing up in some lineups. I don't really think I'm getting to anybody else. Yeah, I've got primarily A.J. Brown in my stacks with Jalen Hurts. some of Devontae Smith, and then no other real target. So if I'm paying up, that's where I'm going. I'm going to Patrick Mahomes or I'm going to Jalen Hurts. I know you'd mentioned liking Patrick Mahomes. Do you prefer him to Hurts this weekend?
Really tough. I think I do. It's the tough part is that I do like multiple pass catchers on the Eagles. I don't really like anybody outside of Kelsey on the Chiefs, so that makes it a little bit more interesting. But I still think that I lean just take advantage of having that tight end spot filled. Just go to that Mahomes to Kelsey stack. So I would say I think I prefer Kansas City over Philly, but obviously any given week, I can't remember who was, if it was you or somebody else. I was doing a show with mentioning that like Jalen Hurts just has an immense floor. Like you never really see Jalen Hurts have complete dud games. So even in, not the best spot in the world against the Bills, certainly, I guess it's kind of a middling spot. Certainly Jalen Hurts, somebody I always have some interest in.
Yeah, and I have him in, let's see, Jalen Hurts actually in right around 20% of my top 150 DK lineups, and also right around 20% of my top 150 FanDuel lineups, then slightly more of Matthew Stafford than that. And then we get to the other group of guys who I have, like I said, pretty tight QB pool this weekend, Neil. I've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks I'm getting exposure to. We already know who 3 of them are, right? We know Matthew Stafford, we know Jalen Hurts, we know Patrick Mahomes. Do you want to guess who the other 3 guys are?
Okay, so you're going to say you had Hurts, Mahomes, Stafford.
Yes. So we know I've got Hurts, Mahomes, and Stafford in my QB pool. I want to guess who the other 3 are that are rounding out my quarterback pool that I'm getting exposure to.
Okay. I think you already alluded to Stroud not being one of them. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Kind of wondering about Will Levis.
Not him.
I guess I should look at the players who look good in the tools rather than the players that I'm like sort of interested. Baker Mayfield.
He is one. Baker Mayfield.
Are you going back to Trevor Lawrence after he did you so right last week?
Absolutely going back to Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence, another guy who's in my QB pool, $6,400 over on DraftKings. FanDuel, he is $7,800. So I do get more exposure to him on DK than I get to FanDuel relatively, but still have exposure to Trevor Lawrence on both sites.
I'll go with Derek Carr.
Derek Carr is not one of them.
All right. Nobody else really stands out to me as...
Okay. So there's a massive piece of chalk on this slate. And I think one of the most reasonable ways you can get some leverage off of him is by playing the passing game instead of the running game.
Gardner Minshew.
It is Gardner Minshew. And by the way, also when it comes to Jonathan Taylor, who's just by far the chalkiest piece on the slate, and our data does love Jonathan Taylor. Like he's somebody who's projected for a ton of ownership, but still, he's somebody who, when I run lineups through the Sims, he shows up in like nearly everything. But the lineups I don't get to Jonathan Taylor have Gardner Minshew at quarterback and the Colts passing game in a handful of them, which I think is a pretty sensible way to build a lineup that doesn't have Jonathan Taylor. And the more that I look at the lineups I've built so far, I'm really talking myself into that in a couple of ways. Number one, some lineups with Jonathan Taylor and Gardner Minshew, because we know that Jonathan Taylor is a guy who can command a 20+% target share. But then also in a situation where Jonathan Taylor fails, it could just be that the touchdowns come through the passing game as opposed to the running game. So that's kind of what leads me to Gardner Minshew. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Great leverage play. Yeah, makes sense to me. I'll probably have some Gardner Minshew. Not a bad spot against the Bucs, obviously. So yeah, I like that.
And then what are you liking at quarterback? So that's my core group of guys at QB. And at the top, it's Stafford and Hurts. Those are the ones I'm getting the most to. So Hurts is the pay up option I have the most of. And then Stafford more like that mid-range / value option at quarterback. But it's not like there's any super crazy like punt type plays to look at QB. But then if you're looking at some of the other quarterbacks that you might like, is there anybody who's not in my pool that maybe you think I should be getting exposure to?
I still like the volatility involved with Will Levis, who I already mentioned him as a guy I was guessing for you. I feel like in this spot against Carolina, like you can't ask for a much better matchup than Carolina. So I think that I'll take some shots on Will Levis there. He doesn't look great in the tools, but I also like that he's the type of player that I don't worry as much about the tools. Like in general, I'm very focused on the tools, but like he has such a short career with so much volatility that I'm not, it's not going to be as accurate as a player who you have a long track record with. He hasn't been in the NFL very long. So I like the idea of taking some shots on Will Levis against Carolina. Hope that he's willing to sling it against a bad defense So I would say that's one player who will be in my pool at least. I'm a little bit interested in Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the Cleveland quarterback, just because I know he has some rushing upside facing this Denver defense that has been, a little bit better, but still not a great Denver defense overall. So a little bit of interest. I want to see what the price tag is actually on DTR. I have the wrong tool open for looking at the actual price tags, but assuming that he's still relatively inexpensive. Yeah, it's 4,900. So I have some interest in DTR. I don't know that I have that many other quarterbacks on this slate that I'm particularly interested in. Yeah, Kenny Pickett maybe against Cincinnati you can consider just because he's only 4,800. I think I'd rather actually go to Dorian Thompson-Robinson than Kenny Pickett. That one's a little bit close for me. I could see paying up for Kyler 6,900 in like the largest field GPPs, decent spot against the Rams. But in general, I think I'm mostly going to be paying up, and we named a few of the, cheaper options that I have interest in. I don't think that there's that many. There are a lot of quarterbacks on the slate that I really don't have any interest in.
Yeah. And I mean, we have so many shitty quarterbacks right now. This is as many shitty quarterbacks as I could ever remember seeing. And, some of these guys, and I know that Tommy DeVito played well last week, but like, I can't make a case for rostering like Tommy DeVito or Aiden O'Connell, or I know Bryce Young was the number one overall pick in the draft, but I kind of I've made fun of Bryce Young a good amount this year. But a couple of weeks ago, I said Tommy DeVito only exists to distract people from the fact that Bryce Young was the worst rookie in the draft this year. But now Tommy DeVito is more expensive than Bryce Young. We've got on DraftKings. Tommy DeVito is priced at $5,200. Bryce Young is $4,900. You got Bryce Young priced the same as Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Each of them 4,900 quarterbacks. You've got a bunch of teams you can just kind of wholesale right off the passing game, can't you?
Yeah, you really can. Like I'm not playing Aiden O'Connell, Tommy DeVito. I'm not playing Jake Browning. Like, plenty of teams that I just have zero interest in. Bryce Young is the one that I thought about naming him, and I was like, I've named him too many times this year and it has never worked I think he's had a couple okay games, but I feel like I probably have hung on to the Bryce Young dream a little bit too long. He looks okay. Like at 0.4% ownership, you could make a large field GPP case for him. But I just don't have a ton of interest there.
So let's go ahead and start looking at some of the running backs then. And by the way, guys, we just had Black Friday was on Friday, and we've got a bunch of deals for Black Friday that are going to be running through the weekend. The most notable of which is our Sims. They are going to be 50% off until Sunday night. So if you guys haven't signed up for a Sims package, sign up using the promo code SIMS, SIMS, that's all capital letters, and you'll get 50% off. That's good for our football package. It's good for our NBA package. And I know just a week ago, we did run a promo that was for the Millie because we saw one of our members win the Millie Maker using the Sims over on the site. And when we ran the Millie promo, we really thought that was going to be the last Sims discount we ran of the year, but then Black Friday ran around and we figured we should probably do something for Black Friday as well, but we don't want to make anybody feel left out. So if you did sign up using that Millie promo, check your email because you are going to be getting a coupon sent to you so you get 50% off using that Sims discount when your current subscription expires. So everybody taken care of here. And if you guys have not checked out the Sims, it has been invaluable to me this season. It's helped me immensely with my process in multiple ways. I've been more profitable this year, but in addition to that, it's just simpler. I can build my lineups a lot faster. I have a better way to sort them with the Sims tool. So go check out the Sims package. If you guys have not already, use the link below to sign up and use that promo code SIMS, SIMS, all capital letters, and you can get 50% off when you sign up. Running back time here, Neil. And let's start by having the Jonathan Taylor conversation. And then we could talk about Rachaad White and if he's out, how that might end up impacting the slate and who we'll get to at running back. But first here, Jonathan Taylor, he's the chalk of the slate, right? He's a guy who's going to be like somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 to 40% owned this week. Super popular on both FanDuel and DraftKings. We've got people in the chat asking why he's going to be so popular. Where was the question? And I know somebody had brought it up.
I saw
here it is. Yeah. Green Mateo 24 said, why would JT be chalk? The Bucs rush defense is elite. Yes. So the Bucs have a really good rushing defense, but I think that the matchups kind of get overrated sometimes when people look at them because price matters so much more, right? It doesn't matter how difficult a matchup it is for a player like Jonathan Taylor because, if he was min price, you're playing him in any matchup. If he's, $10,500, you're probably not even playing him in some of the easiest matchups. Now, that is an extreme example, but Jonathan Taylor is $6,900 on DraftKings. And then on FanDuel, he's $7,500. And if you look at the last couple of games Jonathan Taylor has played, we basically don't have Zach Moss to worry about anymore. Like Zach, as good as Zach Moss was earlier in the year, there was zero he could do to keep his job this year because he crushed. If I'm not mistaken, he was like the leading rusher or the second leading rusher in the NFL at the time Jonathan Taylor returned, and Zach Moss was averaging like 6 yards per carry. Jonathan Taylor struggled when he first came back, and he still ended up getting the starting role over Zach Moss, with Moss kind of falling out of the rotation. So you have a guy in Jonathan Taylor who last year was basically the consensus pick, number one overall in best ball drafts, number one overall pick in fantasy football drafts. And even if he doesn't have an elite matchup, he has the exact same role that he had a couple of years ago that had everybody thinking he was the best fantasy player in the NFL. And he's just way priced down. So you look at all the workload that he's had as of late. And by the way, he's been insanely inefficient. 2 weeks ago, 2.6 yards per carry. The week before that, 3 yards per carry. And despite that, you look at his fantasy production, 18 and 15 fantasy points, which is not like some kind of crazy ceiling game, but at $6,900 on DraftKings, that's a very serviceable option. And then all of a sudden you look at his yards per carry and you have to assume, well, he's going to average more than the 2.8 yards per carry he's averaged in the last couple of weeks. So it's really just price point related that the field is getting to Jonathan Taylor as much as they are. The question that we have to ask ourselves, Neil, is the ownership too much?
Yeah, and I hate that the tools go against my instincts, because my instinct is like that is really heavy ownership on Jonathan Taylor, even with, looking at his role from last week. So to be clear, we're making a bet. If you're playing Jonathan Taylor, it's his role and it's his talent. Last week, he played 89% of snaps. That is massive for a running back. Took 23 of the team's 26 total rushing attempts, and that includes quarterback attempts. And he ran routes on 20 of 28 dropbacks. That's 71% route. Like, those are such elite numbers in terms of opportunities on the team. He only had one target in that game, but he's generally a pretty good pass catching back as well. So yeah, the opportunities and Zach Moss played a total of 8 of 54 snaps last week. So you're absolutely right. Zach Moss, clearly not somebody we really need to worry about anymore, which we all expected that to happen at some point. Like, Jonathan Taylor got the bag and we knew he was going to take over the backfield at some point, and seems that it has finally happened. So the opportunities are there. And the talent is there clearly for Jonathan Taylor, even though he's been a little bit inefficient this year. We've seen him just be a monster in the past. And as you say, 6,900, the price tag is great too. The only thing that we really don't like is the matchup with the Bucs, who are giving up the third fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points per game over the past 5 games to running back. So just a really, really tough spot here for Jonathan Taylor. So to me, given the spot, I see 31% ownership. Looks like too much to me, but this is why I trust the tools so much. Why I go back to the tools, because my instinct is, I'm just going to fade Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to be half the field, whatever. And then I see that we have him optimal 39% of the time. So to me, the tools are going to be much better than me at knowing how frequently a player like Jonathan Taylor is going to be optimal. So ultimately, I'm probably going to come in close to the field. Like, I don't think I'm going to go, I don't think I'm going to have 60-70% Jonathan Taylor. I don't think you'd be crazy if you wanted to, just given the volume, the talent, and the price. I don't think I'm going to go that crazy, but I'll probably be pretty close to the field with Jonathan Taylor. How about you, Greg?
Yeah, I've been building my lineups, and a lot of people have asked me these kind of questions about the Sims. They ask me, like, how much do I trust the data? And at this point, for me, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's multiple reasons, right? Like, I've had, especially in NBA DFS, I've had a bunch of success this year. In NFL DFS, I've also had success. I haven't won tournaments in the same way that I had for NBA,
but you've been also, like, top 100 a million times.
Yeah, but I've had a lot of lineups that have been close to winning the Millie Maker this year on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I'm having a lot of top 1% lineups, and a lot of it is because I'm just trusting the data and what it gives me and what the data is telling me to do, which I know this is a tournament show. People are going to go nuts whenever I say I like a chalk play. I see the comments in the chat. People go, oh, chalk Greg playing another chalk piece here. But if our data says that this guy is chalk and still underowned, right, I kind of have to do with what the data on the site is telling me to do, because it's working for me this year. And it's telling me that I should be getting Jonathan Taylor in like 4/5 of my lineups this week. So Jonathan Taylor, chalk play, but to me, it is warranted. And the lineups I don't have him, I think the most reasonable way to get off him, like I was saying, we're talking about quarterbacks, is look at Gardner Minshew and look at the passing game for the Colts. I do think you can combine Taylor in lineups with Minshew. We saw Taylor get 5 targets 2 weeks ago. But if you go like Michael Pittman to Gardner Minshew in a lineup that doesn't have Jonathan Taylor, I do think it's a pretty reasonable way to pivot and get off of him. But for you, in lineups that don't have Jonathan Taylor, like, is there a leverage play you like? Is there a pivot play? How do you approach a lineup that might not have Jonathan Taylor?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've already kind of nailed it with with the Gardner Minshew stacks as a potential, or just playing one of the receivers. Certainly, Michael Pittman would be the go-to there. I think for the most part in my non-Jonathan Taylor lineups, I'm just not going to have a Colts player. I think that's totally obviously viable as well. Plenty of different ways to play. You can play different price points. You can play a direct pivot in a guy like Josh Jacobs coming in lower owned. So a lot of different ways to play John. Like I don't think there's one set way that I'm going to play my non-Jonathan Taylor lineup. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go.
Yeah, so let's go ahead now and talk about Rachaad White, who it seems like neither you nor I are calling it like super likely that Rachaad White ends up playing. So let's look at what else we could potentially get into from the Bucs, as well as their prices, because like earlier in the week, I wasn't thinking a ton about the Bucs backup running backs and their prices because it wasn't really relevant to anything that was going on. So let's look at some of the prices for these guys on both DraftKings and FanDuel, where it is actually super cheap. Chase Edmonds, $4,300. Keyshawn Vaughn, $4,000. That's on DraftKings. Let's see what we have on FanDuel. We have Edmonds is $4,800, Vaughn $4,400. We talked a little bit about it at the top here, but if Rachaad White is out, would you be looking to go more towards Edmonds or Vaughn, and how high of a priority would they be?
Yeah, it'd be Edmonds for me for sure. Just looking at the past two games, Rachaad White has played 98 snaps. Chase Edmonds has played 30 snaps. Sean Tucker has played one. So Chase Edmonds has been pretty clearly the RB2 behind Rachaad White. And he's a running back who can do everything. Like he's a pretty capable pass catcher. He's not like a great running back, but he's like, I'd say a league average NFL running back who can catch the ball. So I think that Chase Edmonds could just step directly into that Rachaad White role. Now, obviously we don't know. We'll have to, keep listening, see if we can hear any rumblings about what the Bucs are planning on doing. But if we don't get anything that says like, oh, they're going to be starting Keyshawn Vaughn, or they're going to be, give us any kind of indication, my assumption would be that Chase Edmonds takes on a pretty significant role here. And if he does, yeah, I'm going to have some interest in 4,300 Chase Edmonds as the potential bell cow back. I don't know that it's a guarantee, even if he starts, that he actually steps directly into the role that we have had Rachaad White in, but I think they would be the likeliest to take on a bell cow role so for me it would be Chase Edmonds. I'm probably not bothering with any other Bucs running backs, but yeah, 4,300 Chase Edmonds would be interesting to me. How about you?
Yeah, so it's funny. I'd actually brought up Keyshawn Vaughn, although Vaughn, has been inactive earlier in the year. Obviously, Vaughn was somebody who was much higher up on the depth chart, but he's never really been in favor of Tampa Bay. No matter what the coaching staff has been, he's never been all that in favor in Tampa Bay since they drafted him. But yeah, I think it does really have to be Edmonds, considering he's solidified himself as the backup. And I even think he probably would be a bell cow back and take on the Rachaad White role should White end up being ruled out. We did get a pretty interesting comment from Eric T in the YouTube chat, which I didn't really think of it from this angle, but he said the Rachaad White downgrade is being overblown. He thinks it's teams being safe after the Bijan stuff. It's a good point. That's definitely possible. It's an angle I didn't think of. So maybe I'll say, like, I was starting this conversation saying like I'm like 90% sure Rachaad White isn't going to play. Maybe that makes me like 75% sure he doesn't play as opposed to my number before. But, we're going to have the information at least before lock anyway. We're going to know from, Schefter or Rapp, whoever it is that ends up tweeting about it midnight on Saturday, whether Rachaad White is going to be in or not. But yeah, it's going to be hard to get away from Chase Edmonds should Rachaad White be ruled out. And then, Neil, we're going to have crazy game stacking situations. You could get Chase Edmonds, Jonathan Taylor. You could play one of the quarterbacks in the game, like whether it be Baker Mayfield or Gardner Minshew, and some of the pass catching options. And then if the game shoots out, like those guys are all cheap enough that you could combine them with whatever kind of payoff options you want in other spots. So this would be an elite game stacking option should Rachaad White not play.
Yeah, it's a pretty inexpensive game across the board. Like nobody who's super expensive, and actually one of the higher implied totals on the slate. Both teams have the Bucs have an implied team total of 21, the Colts 23.5 on this particular slate where we have so many awful quarterbacks. Like it's actually one of the higher totals on the slate. So being able to play that game really cheap, yeah, definitely a spot where we're going to be finding some value. You can full on game stack. You can pick individual pieces that are cheap, but yeah, definitely going to be kind of a priority of a game.
So let's go ahead and look at some of the pay-ups at running back. And, Jonathan Taylor at $6,900. It's very cheap for Jonathan Taylor, but that still does make him the fourth most expensive running back on the DraftKings slate. Over on FanDuel at $7,500. Joe Mixon, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne and Kamara are all more expensive than him. But, this is not like a slate with a crazy amount of spend up options at running back. So outside of Jonathan Taylor, are there any pricey running back options that you gravitate towards at all?
I don't know if there's any that I like truly love. I said last week that I wanted to completely write off the Giants offense, and I had to consider last week Saquon Barkley only because of the matchup was so good with the Commanders. I think that now I'm ready to write off the Giants entirely and just not worry about anybody on the Giants offense. I don't think I'm going to Saquon Barkley this week. Alvin Kamara, just based on his role in the Saints, he has had such a great role for the Saints. Hard to not have some interest in Kamara. Last game had another 7 targets. He's just targeted so often that, I have to have at least a little bit of interest. I'll play some Kamara. He is expensive. He's the most expensive running back on the slate. We have slight positive leverage there for Kamara, 8% ownership, 8.3% optimal. So I think you go to Kamara. He would be probably, of the pay up options, the one I'd be the most inclined to go to. Travis Etienne, I think, is actually losing his role a little bit, and I think they've said that they want to stop giving him quite as many carries as they have. Now, of course, he had a total bell cow role early on, so he can lose some of that role and still, get plenty of looks. But the Texans have not been, we think of them as being a huge run funnel. They have been in several years in the past. This year, not at all. They're 22nd in terms of pass DVOA, 12th in terms of rush DVOA. So more of a pass funnel this year than a run funnel. I think Etienne is fine, but I just, given that his role is diminishing a little bit, and it's not actually the spot that we've thought of it as being in the past, we have him slightly over-owned, 12% ownership, 10% optimal on Etienne. So honestly, outside of Taylor, I'd say some interest in Kamara. I'll probably have a share, at least, of a couple shares of ETN. Probably don't think I'll have any of Barkley. DeAndre Swift, I don't think I'm really gonna go there against the Bills very much. Josh Jacobs is sort of interesting just because the Chiefs defense has been a little bit of a run funnel, 27th in terms of run DVOA, 3rd in terms of pass DVOA, but the Raiders only have a 16.75 implied team total. So I think, I should go down one more, because I do think Kyren Williams, like, who knows what his ownership is going to end up being. It's going to be very ownership dependent. I think our tools are not updated for his, like, if you came in at 1% ownership, I'd love Kyren Williams against the Cardinals. We're gonna have to wait and see the tools after they've updated for Kyren Williams being in. But yeah, he'd be probably the next, after Jonathan Taylor, the next that I'm the most interested in of the pay up guys. Who do you like of the pay up guys?
Yeah, so one note on Kyren Williams is I do feel like we need a little bit more information there, because we know he's going to play, but then we also heard that they're going to be cautious with his workload. Just the most difficult coach speak to navigate when, like, we're going to be cautious with him. You never know what that means. It could mean nothing. Right. Sometimes it could mean he's looking good and they're like, hey, he's looking good, we're going to keep running him. I tend to think, especially with the scenario that the Rams right now minus 600 to miss the playoffs, that they're probably not going to push him into a workhorse role. So I think he's probably going to split snaps with Royce Freeman. That's just my best guess at the time we're doing this Saturday afternoon. If that ends up being the case, I'm probably not going to end up playing either of Royce Freeman or Kyren Williams, and I'll just kind of look elsewhere. So one guy that I like, and also one other thing to mention before I bring up the guy that I like in this price range, almost everybody outside of Jonathan Taylor is projected for like the same ownership once you get above $6,200. Have you noticed that every single guy that's $6,200 or above is like 8 to 15% on all of them grouped together? We've got Barkley. Barkley 16%, Kamara 8%, ETN 12%, Swift 12%, Jacobs 11%. We've got Bijan Robinson 14%, Henry 15%, Joe Mixon 7%, Pacheco 12%. So at this point, like, there isn't much to consider when it comes to ownership. It's very, very close. It's just, all right, which guy do you think is the best chance of success? To me, it's Derrick Henry. I love his matchup against the Carolina Panthers this weekend. And also, when you talked before about how the Texans used to be a run funnel, you and I have been doing the show together for a few years now. Do you remember whenever we would see the Titans play the Texans, people would just be like, you have to play Derrick Henry in this matchup. Yeah. And that's all people would talk about. It'd be super popular, and people be, we never see people say you have to play Derrick Henry anymore. And I think that we're getting to a point now where he's starting to get a little bit overlooked. You know, is he the same guy once was? Probably not. But this is a great matchup against the Carolina Panthers. And not as cheap as I can remember Derrick Henry in a great matchup in a very long time. So he's $6,400 on DraftKings. He's more expensive at $7,800 on FanDuel, but his game is so much more fantasy friendly on FanDuel than DK, because we don't have to worry about the full point PPR bonus. So I think that the extra salary on FanDuel still kind of works in Henry's favor. So this is the guy in this price range outside of Jonathan Taylor I like the most.
Yeah, I was wondering if he was going to qualify as I was thinking about mentioning Henry as we were talking about the more expensive guys. He's kind of like right on that line in terms of salary, but I'm with you. Looks really interesting. The downside to Henry is he's actually played fewer snaps than Tyjae Spears over the past 2 weeks. He's played 49 snaps to Tyjae Spears 52. So clearly doesn't have that same workload that he has had in years past. 21 rushing attempts over the past 2 weeks, 2 targets, only running routes on 17.5% of drop back. So really you need him to be getting it done on efficiency. I mean, maybe he sees more snaps too, more carries too, just because it is such a prime matchup for him. But yeah, I definitely have some interest in Derrick Henry because of that matchup being so elite. Hard to ignore the matchup. And of course, we all know Derrick Henry gets better as the year goes on. You know, he has to build that momentum. And once we get into late November, December, I think his post Thanksgiving splits might be a thing. I forget what the actual splits are, but Derrick Henry tends to do better later on in the season. I don't know if that is something that is sticky at all, but it's been several years that he's been better as the season goes on. And I think there is something to some players maybe do just kind of need to get those reps in to get used to it, get used to game speed. So yeah, definitely some interest in Derrick Henry. I'm actually, as I'm looking at it, this is the first time I'm thinking, do I have interest in Tyjae Spears? Just because we are talking about Derrick Henry, looking at those splits, like Tyjae Spears also in that fantastic matchup, and he's only 4,400. So I would say, yeah, I actually have interest in both of the Tennessee running backs. Probably not playing them in the same lineup, but yeah, I'll have some shares of Derrick Henry for sure.
And I'm going to give you, this isn't really, I know we've got Mike with some jokes and narratives he's thrown into the YouTube chat here, but go ahead and look at the game scripts, the last couple of games that the Titans played. And we know what the role of Derrick Henry is, and this has been his role for a long time, but especially so at this point in his career. He's somebody who, if the game is close or if the Titans are leading, he's on the field. If they are behind, he's not on the field, and Tyjae Spears is out there. Last week, they lose 34-14 to the Jaguars. That is not a Derrick Henry game script. The week before, they lose 20-6 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That is not a Derrick Henry game script. The weeks before that, Derrick Henry had 17 rushing attempts and actually even 4 targets in the passing game, believe it or not, against the Steelers. That was a game they lost 16-20. The week before against the Atlanta Falcons, they won 28-23. Derrick Henry, 4 targets in the passing game, 22 rushing attempts. What is the spread of this game? We've got the Titans favored by 3 points. So I think the workload we saw to Tyjae Spears the last couple of weeks was more to do with the game script than the team saying we're getting away from Derrick Henry.
Yeah, it's possible. I feel like he's just looking through his like snap share for the entire season. Like other than week 2, he only played 37% of snaps, but he's played, 50+% most weeks. But yeah, this is also the rare game where the Titans are favored. So you could be right. I still think so maybe if you play Tyjae Spears, you want to tie him to a Panthers player, like hope that the Panthers are able to put up some points as well. Yeah, I don't know. That's you make a valid point, but I still think I might have you make a valid point that I think is a good point for Derrick Henry. I think I would still have some interest in Tyjae Spears, just even if he is only going to get limited opportunities. Like I think he's going to get some opportunities regardless of the game script. Like it's not like he doesn't play at all in the first half. So yeah, it's I think both are pretty interesting to me.
And then a few other running backs that I am building lineups around this week, Neil, are James Conner. I still think there's a really, really good opportunity for James Conner. He's been terrible since coming back from injury. This offense should be much better with Kyler Murray at quarterback than they were earlier in the year with Josh Dobbs and everything else they had going on at running back. And James Conner still plays a ton. He's relatively cheap on both DraftKings and FanDuel, so I like getting to him. Another one also, Javonte Williams, also in that like mid 5K price range. So Williams last week, we saw it was a not great game overall against the Minnesota Vikings, between the Broncos and the Vikings. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a primetime game, which is basically cursed to be terrible in the NFL in 2023. Games before that, though, 21 carries and 4 targets against the Bills, 27 carries and 3 targets against the Chiefs. So I do think there's a lot of upside for the touches on Javonte Williams. So that's a core play for me. Javonte Williams, James Conner, and the other one being a little bit more on the contrarian end, Ramondre Stevenson, who's quietly been pretty solid in 4 of the last 5 games. I don't really think people have taken notice that we're seeing that target share come back up to what it was in last year. We also see him get more rushing attempts. He's getting more involved in the red zone. We also saw that really long touchdown run a few weeks ago. It was like 70 yards. He ended up breaking off a touchdown. So those are the core guys for me at running back. Once we get behind, like the Jonathan Taylor, whatever ends up happening with the Buccaneers running back situation. Williams, Connor, Stevenson, are those players that you guys like at all? Or is there somebody else also that you would consider to be like a core play at running back?
Yeah, Ramondre Stevenson definitely, I think, is my favorite of that group. I was gonna bring him up. He's just the volume is there. The matchup against the Giants, they've just been terrible. Like, I mean, I know they won last week, but in general, just not a great defense. And I think that Ramondre Stevenson could be very involved at just 5,800. As you said, he's been pretty involved recently. Played 68% of snaps, had 20 carries in the most recent game, and 5 targets on top of that. Now has a fantastic matchup. The Patriots playing to win. I'm sure they're going to be going to Ramondre Stevenson a good amount. So I would say he's my favorite of those 3 that you mentioned. Yeah, I don't love the matchup for Javonte Williams, but do love the volume there. He looks good as well. James Conner, both the matchup and the opportunity is pretty good. Isaiah Pacheco, another guy that I'd throw out there that I have some interest in just because the Chiefs are favored to win by have a 10-point spread in the game. So just should be a game where they're going to want to run a little bit. He's 6,200. So not like a slam dunk play, but like I'd say a pretty solid play there and a nice matchup for Pacheco. And then I'm want to look up the splits for Najee in the most recent game. Sorry, Jaylen Warren in the most recent game. Looks like I have the past 2 games pulled up. Let me look at the actual splits after. Okay, so they came out and said Jaylen Warren is our starter going forward, and then he played fewer snaps than Najee Harris in week 11.
Crushed.
So that
and crushed.
Exactly. He's been so efficient. Like, I don't understand why they don't give him more run. And they came out and said he's going to be our starting running back going forward. I think I'm still willing to go back there. It's a great matchup again for the Steelers run game. The Bengals 30th in terms of run DVOA this year. Steelers only have a 19 implied team total, so it's not like they're expected to put up a ton of points, but I'm still willing to go back to a 5,400 Jaylen Warren in that spot against the Bengals. I'd throw him into that bucket of kind of mid-range, mid-price point players that I like as well.
Jaylen Warren is averaging 6.2 yards per carry this year. Najee Harris is averaging 3.9. So yeah. Harris has 6 more rushing yards than Jaylen Warren on 58 more rushing attempts. 48 more rushing attempts. Just crazy that they aren't giving Jaylen Warren more of a workload. And, I know a lot of times, especially in the fantasy community, we talk about how running backs don't matter all that much. And in general, that's true, right? It's kind of dependent on the offensive line play, other factors. When you have 2 players on the exact same team in the exact same scenario, and one of them is averaging 3.9 yards per carry and the other one is averaging 6.2, give the guy who's averaging 6.2 yards per carry more of the touches as opposed to the other guy, or else we're going to end up with another Tony Pollard situation on our hands where it's like, hey, this guy's consistently better than Zeke. And then by the time he finally takes over as the starting running back, it's like a year or two too late. Just make Jaylen Warren the guy. Like, Najee Harris is clearly not been the guy for the Steelers. So I don't mind that shout out either, because just logically, they should be giving Jaylen Warren more of the touches, and he does shit whenever he touches the football.
Right. He's good whenever I watched the Barry Sanders documentary, Bye Bye Barry, last night, and I just kept thinking that guy looks just like Jaylen Warren. Man, it's just like undeniable how close they are. No, but to be honest, it was funny watching that and just seeing how like hyped they were for running backs back then, where these days people are like, running backs don't really matter that much. But clearly there is a difference when one guy's below 4 yards per carry, the other guy's above 6, and both like getting significant volume. So it's not like it's a small sample size kind of thing. They should be getting Jaylen Warren the ball more. They've been saying they will. They named him the starter, and maybe it's just going to be a 1 week delay after they named him the starter, where he actually gets the starter's workload. I'd say those are the players that immediately stand out to me. Do you have any other players who you think are going to be a big part of your builds?
Not a big part. Like there's other guys that show up in a couple lineups here or there, but nothing like significant where I would tell people, because I know a lot of our audience playing like 1, 2, 3 lineups.
Yeah.
And the guys that I've talked about so far running back, those are really the core guys that I'm expecting to be getting the most of. And then just, the Rachaad White injury, the big outstanding piece of news that we need an update on.
One more that I would add there, I guess, is, and this is just occurring to me, Jerome Ford. I guess you could also consider Kareem Hunt if you really wanted to, but against that Broncos run defense, 31st, I said I have some interest in DTR, but also you just go to the run game instead of the passing game. Jerome Ford, 29 carries over the past 2 games. So that's decent volume, also running routes on 47% of dropbacks, 6 targets over the past 2 games. And, he's, what is he, 5,600? So it's not like he's super cheap, but like pretty great matchup for Jerome Ford. Would make sense for them to stick to the ground game. So I do have some interest in Jerome Ford at 4% ownership, 5% chance of being optimal. We have slight positive leverage there.
All right, so we'll move on and talk about the wide receivers. But first, one more Black Friday deal for you guys. And this one is promo code Black Friday. Pretty easy to remember for Black Friday. So it is BLACKFRIDAY, all capital letters, because our sports betting product, Odd Shopper, that is also going to be 50% off. And that is through Monday for Black Friday. And if you guys haven't checked out Odd Shopper, it's really simplified my betting process, because I just go to the page and I see which bets project best from an EV perspective using a market-based EV angle. We've got an algorithm that's taking a bunch of information from all different sports books, how accurate they've been historically in different markets, using that to calculate what the fair line is. And then from there, we're finding out, all right, on the market, which line is actually the most favorable and how does it compare to our fair line projection. That's how we're recommending which bets have the best EV on any given week for NFL or any given day for NBA. We also have a new feature coming to it where there's going to be an expert picks page where my favorite bets of the day, I could just tag them and it'll show up on a page. It'll be like, here's Greg's favorite bets. Here are Eric Lindquist's favorite bets, Ben Roz's favorite bets. So if you guys don't want to look at all the data and you just want to know, what am I betting on? What is Ben or anybody else betting on? You just go to the experts picks page and you could just bet the exact same stuff that we are. And you can see what lines that we betted at as well. And we've got this Black Friday deal for 50% off. So if you sign up, you're going to get your first month for less than $25. So really good value here over at Odd Shopper. Sign up using that link below and the promo code Black Friday to get access to the best bets out there for less than $25 for a month. And it's something that really I'm confident pays for itself. It's helped me make a bunch of money so far this year. Wide receivers, Neil, starting at the high end. Are there any pay-up wide receivers you're liking? Because there are only 2 guys I have a significant amount of exposure to that are $7K or more expensive on DK.
Is one of them Cooper Kupp?
One of them is Cooper Kupp. I am expecting him to be, well, yesterday I didn't think he was going to play. Now that we found out he's in, when you consider, do you remember when he came off the injured reserve? What was it, week 5? And it's like, all right, let's see what happens with Cooper Kupp. They're probably going to ramp up. And just like immediately, he was the guy for the team. So consider he's playing now. I just have to assume he's going to be the guy. I know he got banged up last week. He's projected for, some ownership. It is 18% over on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's also projected for 18%. I do not think he gets to be that popular. I think people are going to look at what happened last week with the ankle injury. I know my best lineup last week, Neil, actually was a Lawrence Ridley stack and had Cooper Kupp in it. And that was like my one bullet to win a tournament last week, where it was like, I'm going into the late games like, boy, if I get a ceiling Cooper Kupp game, I'm very, very live this week. And then what happens? He drops a touchdown pass and like next play hurts his ankle and he's done for the day. But I do think a lot of people that played Cooper Kupp last week or saw the injury are going to be skittish to play him. And I don't have any of those reservations. So I really do like getting the Kupp.
Yeah. I mean, I have slight reservations just because of the injury, thinking it looked worse than it was, but I'm still going to be playing some Cooper Kupp. I'm with you. I don't think he gets a ton of ownership, and clearly the upside is there. Like if you're playing large field tournaments, you don't really care that much about the floor. You care more about the upside, and Kupp has that against the Cardinals. So I'm with you. Kupp looks fantastic. On the high end, definitely not going to Jamar Chase with Brown in his quarterback. Just, I don't really like, even if he has great volume, I don't think that the arm talent is there. I don't think the Bengals are getting to a ton. I do have interest in Stephon Diggs. As I said, I think the Eagles secondary is just not great. We've got Diggs at 7% ownership. Doesn't look great in the tools. We only have him optimal 6% of the time. So a little bit over owned in the tools. But if I've got the salary, like Diggs is somebody that I have interest in going to. AJ Brown, obviously in that same game, middling matchup with the Bills, but you can always play Eagles stack. So I think AJ Brown will be a bigger part of just game stacks. I think I'd be more inclined to go to Stephon Diggs individually than AJ Brown at the top. But yeah, definitely interest in Cooper Kupp. Puka Nacua, similarly, like he still has elite volume, or he has had games with elite volume with Cooper Kupp. It's not always there. It's a little bit less consistent than early on in the year, but he's had some games with Kupp. So I might go back and try the double stack thing with the Rams again, which I've tried, has not worked yet this season, but I'll take my shots on Kupp and Nacua again against the Cardinals. Yeah, I don't know. It's Devontae Smith, 7,100, as you said, another guy you can pair with Jalen Hurts. I know he was popping on owner's box when I was looking at the Sims for owners box earlier. Devontae Smith making it into a lot of lineups. Yeah, Mike Evans looks fine. I don't know that I'm going to Devontae Adams with AOC passing the ball against the Chiefs. Not really interested there. Yeah, so I'd say Kupp probably the number one priority, followed by Diggs for me on the high end.
Yeah, so for me, and I mean, you like Josh Allen a little bit, so it makes sense you have Diggs in there. For me, I liked Jalen Hurts, so it just makes sense. I mean, my two most rostered quarterbacks are Jalen Hurts and Matthew Stafford. So it just makes sense that I would have Cooper Kupp and AJ Brown as my two most rostered spend up options. They're going to be correlating with the quarterbacks that I like getting to. Let's start moving down to the cheaper price range. And as we start to look, below 7K, some of the mid range and like that upper mid range, what stands out to me also, some guys that are correlating with some of the quarterbacks I like, it is Christian Kirk, Chris Godwin, and Michael Pittman. Pittman talked about before, if you are going to pivot off of Jonathan Taylor, I think Pittman's the most reasonable way to go, where you're getting direct leverage. If it's the Colts passing game that scores the touchdowns and it's Michael Pittman who's catching the pass as opposed to Jonathan Taylor running it in, that's the way that I like to go in lineups that don't have Jonathan Taylor. So this mid-range for me, I like Taylor. I like Godwin. I like Christian Kirk. I know the field is really getting to these Texans pass catchers again, at least as of now. I'm not really, everybody loves Tank Dell, but he's got to be fairly expensive now. We got Tank Dell is now, who, by the way, he legally changed his name to Tank.
Was it legal or just like officially with the NFL?
I thought it was legally. Maybe I misunderstood.
I might be, I have no idea, but yeah, that's good for him. Good for him.
Yeah. Well, he is projected for 16% ownership now at $6,900. And maybe I'm just on the wrong side of this, and he truly is like one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, but I'm hardly getting to him at all on DraftKings or FanDuel. On FanDuel, he's $7,800 and projected for 15% ownership. He popped up in 2% of my top 150 lineups. So somebody who I'm underweight to the field there is Tank Dell, but kind of gave out who my core guys are at the position. One I really, really like the most from, really a game theory perspective, and then just in general is Michael Pittman. What are you seeing in this mid / like upper range?
Yeah, I'm with you on Pittman. Just looks like a great leverage play on all the Jonathan Taylor ownership. I was planning on just playing Nico Collins instead of Tank Dell, just hoping that the field is going to go there. The disparity in ownership isn't as much as I thought it was going to be. Like, we do have some ownership going to Nico Collins, but worth noting, Nico Collins didn't get it done last week, but 11 targets. He had 7 receptions last week. Tank Dell only had 10 targets. He had 8 receptions, just happened to get many more yards. Now, obviously you can say, well, that's because he's talented. He's got juice. That's why he's getting all those yards with those targets. But if Nico Collins gets 11 targets to Tank Dell's 10 consistently, I would expect Nico Collins to outscore him a good amount of the time. We do have some ownership going to Collins, 9% going to Collins, 16% going to Dell. So it's not a huge disparity, but I think I'd still be more inclined to go to Nico Collins. I think there's higher odds that Nico Collins's ownership comes in lower than we have it than Tank Dell, just because Dell has been so good. So some interest in Nico Collins, although I was hoping for lower ownership there. I think you can go to, as I said, I have some interest in Will Levis. I think you can go to DeAndre Hopkins, obviously in your Will Levis lineups, but even outside of those lineups, I have some interest in DeAndre Hopkins in a nice matchup here. Yeah, I think that you named Ridley and Christian Kirk as players who are kind of interesting. Amari Cooper, I think in my DTR lineups, I say I'm going to play some Dorian Thompson-Robinson lineups. Amari Cooper is going to be my number one pass catching option in those lineups. I don't play naked quarterback, so I know some people might ask, well, could you play DTR naked? I don't do that just because I want to eliminate the number of things I need to get right. So I would play a pass catcher with them, and I think Amari Cooper would probably be the number one that I'd have the most interest in there. Yeah, you could go to Rashee Rice, I guess, in your Mahomes stacks. Not somebody I have a ton of interest in at 5,500. Just doesn't have, he doesn't run enough routes. I believe in the most recent game, he actually saw a dip. Let me look. Yeah, 52% route participation in the last game for Rashee Rice. So honestly, not a ton of interest there. Wouldn't play him except for maybe in some Mahomes stacks. Yeah, I could go back to Gabe Davis at 0.5% ownership. Looks fine to me. Yeah, I'm throwing names out there now, but I've thrown out plenty. Anybody else that you want to talk about?
Yeah, it's really my core in that mid-range there was Pittman, Christian Kirk, Godwin. It's also a few of the wide receivers that correlate once again with the quarterbacks that I'm stacking. On the low end, There is a cheap punt wide receiver that our data really loves this week. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about here, Neil, but a min price wide receiver over on DraftKings. And then on FanDuel, he's priced a little bit more expensive. He doesn't pop up quite as frequently, but still, somebody makes it into some of my lineups over on FanDuel as well at $5,300. What do you think of Juju Smith-Schuster, who has seen an uptick in targets? I don't know if you saw last week, but he was in the field a ton. Off the top of my head, I think he ran like 68 routes or something like that. Juju last week. Like Juju played a ton. And has he been good this year? Absolutely not. Has he been disappointing? 100%. But there's been so many injuries to the Patriots wide receivers. They have a good matchup this weekend against the Giants. And, it's not like we expect there to be that many competitive Patriots games. This should be one of them. I know we've got zero to look at in terms of the box score to have any kind of confidence in Juju, but he is the flat min price over on DK. He's not projected for that much ownership, and it seems like he's had a big uptick in his workload.
Yeah, 82% route participation in the most recent game for Juju, second on the Patriots behind Demario Douglas, who ran one more route than Juju in that game. Juju actually only had one target in their most recent game, which I guess was week 10. I think they had a bye last week. But that's like, I think I pay more attention to route participation over a small sample size than target share. Over a longer sample size, then you want to care more about target share. But I think in a small sample size, I'm more just like, who is out there, who is potentially getting opportunities. Juju's a guy that if he were chalky, I'd be like, yeah, I'm out. I'm not going to play a chalky Juju Smith-Schuster. Like, why would you do that? But we've only got him at 7% ownership with a 20% chance of being optimal. So if the ownership holds close to where it is right now, I'll definitely have some interest in Juju. Just, hope for a touchdown at 3,000, maybe a few catches, and that might be enough for him to get there. And obviously you can hope for more. Like, he's out there on the field enough that he could have more than 3 catches and a touchdown. He could, get a 100-yard bonus, that kind of thing. So yeah, Juju looks good at this level of ownership. If he gets chalky, I might stay away, but for right now, we've got some really nice positive leverage on Juju. So yeah, interested for sure.
Anything else you want to talk about at the cheap end? Because there aren't that many punt wide receivers I get to. Juju shows up in a lot of lineups, but nobody else really on the value end that's being prioritized to me running data through the Sims. But yeah, Juju, a big one, getting to a whole bunch of exposure there. And I didn't feel great about it at first when I just saw the exposure, but then, I talked to Spags about it yesterday. You look more into the routes he's running and then also just how often he's on the field. And you have to get a sense there's a real opportunity there for a guy who's $5,300 on FanDuel and the flat min price as well on DK. And Swaggy P in the chat is saying that route participation is overrated. It's about how many targets you get when you're on the field. I mean, kind of, but if you only play, 10 plays, if you're only running, 10 routes, there's only so many opportunities for you to actually be able to catch passes and score fantasy points. Kind of what it's most, equivalent to is like usage and playing time in the NBA, where it's not the end all be all, right? Like, you want to have a little bit of both, but there's also a history beyond this year. Juju has been good in the past. So if you look at all the injuries that the Patriots have, in fact, they made a pretty significant monetary investment in Juju. I think that he's definitely somebody who has an opportunity. And Josh D in the chat saying that his over-under is 1.5 receptions. Yeah, I like the over on that number as well. So I'm going to be playing Juju in tournaments this week, particularly because of what the salary. Like, if he was 5,000, I'm not playing him. If he's 4,000, I also might not be playing him. At the flat min, I'm willing to take some shots over there on Juju Smith-Schuster. So anything else you want to bring up here for a wide receiver, Neil?
Yeah, I'm just looking at potentially Greg Dortch is somebody that I might have interest in. I believe Michael Wilson has been ruled out. So then we might actually get some Greg Dortch in our lives. Rondell Moore has had 10 targets over the past 2 weeks. He's only 3,600. So you can consider Rondell Moore with Kyler back. I know he had that long early touchdown last week, and I believe that was his only catch, but 10 targets over the past 2 weeks, definitely promising for Rondell Moore. And then Greg Dortch, as I said, with, I believe Michael Wilson is out. I'll have to double check that. But with Michael Wilson out, I think Greg Dortch could be somebody that we're going to end up having some interest in. I know last week he played at least a little bit over the past 2. I guess I've got 2 games pulled up here. Yeah, in the fourth quarter of the past 2 weeks, he's run 14 routes. I think that Michael Wilson maybe left in the third. I don't remember exactly that, but either way, Rondell Moore, Greg Dortch, I have some interest just because we have Kyler back, and these are guys that Kyler has peppered with targets at times in the past. But I think for the most part, we've named all the players that I'm very interested in.
All right, so let's move on to tight end. If you guys haven't done yet, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And once again, shout out to DraftKings Rainmakers, who's sponsoring the show today. Tight end, this is another slate where I've only got 4 tight ends popping up meaningfully for me. So, I've got 4 tight ends that make up pretty much all my tight end exposure, my 5th most roster tight end. So I'll have you guess, because I enjoy when I have you guess which players it is that I'm getting to when I run our data through the Sims. My 5th most rostered tight end on DraftKings is Cade Otton, and he is in 3.3% of lineups.
Wow.
My 5th most rostered tight end on FanDuel is Tyler Higbee in 3.3% of lineups. So that goes to number one. I'll give you a little hint as to who my top roster tight ends are not. But who do you think the 4 are that I'm getting to? And it's a very condensed tight end pool for me right now.
Travis Kelce.
1 for 1.
Trey McBride.
2 for 2. I think you're going to nail these pretty easily, actually.
Evan Ingram.
3 for 3.
Dalton Kincaid.
4 for 4. Yeah, the tight end position just kind of sucks this week. I know those guys are popular. I don't really feel like there's a massive need to go to like some crazy 1 or 2% on tight end. My data isn't giving it to me. I'm certainly not going out of my way to like force in like a Kylan Granson or to force in like Jonnu Smith at tight end or anything like that. Tight ends kind of sucked this year. We've got Travis Kelce as a very obvious spend up option. If you have the salary space, you're getting up to Kelce. And the other guys, Kincaid, Trey McBride, Evan Ingram, just mixing and matching them into lineups as well, or when they fit with my quarterbacks. Is there anybody outside of those guys who you think that like you need to be considering at tight end in any kind of meaningful way?
Not really. I mean, and I think for those who don't have it in front of them, the reason Greg knew I was going to nail this pretty easily is you see our top 4 tight ends. The lowest, Kincaid, has a 17% chance of being optimal. Then there's a 10% drop down to our 5th best tight end in terms of optimal odds. So really easy game this week, just nailing those top 4 tight ends. I don't really think anybody that like you need to be considering. I'll have some shares of David Njoku. Like I said, I'm going to have some DTR, so maybe I'll go to some 4,100 Njoku in those lineups. You could go to Higbee in some of your Ram stacks. I guess Kyle Pitts at 3% ownership is sort of interesting, but yeah, I think that you basically nailed the guys that you need to be considering.
Yeah, and by tomorrow, like I said, I had 3% of Tyler Higbee. Maybe as I try to like more get aggressively game stack and correlate my lineups, maybe that means I get to like 5 or 6% of Tyler Higbee. But I feel pretty certain that Kincaid, McBride, Kelce, Ingram, that's going to be my core group of guys at tight end. So Neil, we reached the end here of the show where we go and give out top stacks. We tell people who our favorite targets are for large field GPPs. And if you guys are only building one lineup, who we think the stacking combination should be. And something else we've been doing as of late, Mike, if you wouldn't mind, pull up the lineup generator and we're just going to build one lineup on FanDuel, one lineup on DraftKings, and we'll see what the lineup generator is telling us is a top stack of the week. So we'll have a couple lineups built here for the lineup generator. Just go DraftKings main to start and do all stack types, and then just a balanced lineup and just one. And we'll see whatever's in that one lineup. Let's see. So this is okay, I don't mind this. This is a Mahomes to interesting. So this is a Mahomes to Rashee Rice stack is what it's giving us here on DK. So now build one for FanDuel. And then we'll see what pops up in the one FanDuel lineup. And Mecole Hardman placed on the IR as we're talking here.
Oh, wow.
All right. So while he is doing that, I'm kind of trying to figure out which direction I want to go with my stack.
And Kadarius Toney out, if you didn't see that.
Yeah, and Kadarius Toney was somebody who I was going to like as a contrarian play earlier in the week. And then shocking, he gets hurt. He looked really good last week, and it was a spot where I was like, hey, Kadarius Toney kind of looks good here, especially on those punt returns. I thought they were going to maybe work him more into the game this week, and then what do you know? He gets hurt again. We've got on FanDuel, Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. So that is a double stack that the lineup generator is recommending for FanDuel purposes. If you guys want to freeze frame, you can see what those lineups are there. They're being built by the site. There's a link below to sign up for the lineup generator as well. Neil, give me your stack. If you're playing one lineup in a large field tournament this week, which quarterback are you going to and which stack partners?
See, I don't feel any pressure right now because nobody really cares about my stack. They want to know the stack of the guy who's gotten it right like 4 out of the past 5 weeks or something ridiculous like that. This is going to be a spot where I'm just going to go with my gut here. I should just trust the tools because that's usually when I do better, but I'm going to go with my gut. I'm going to go to Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs against that Eagles secondary. How about you?
two in my head that I really want to go to. And I mean, I already said what my two most roster stacks are. So I'm going to be going to one of those. What is the, you know what? Matt Stafford's only projected for 6% ownership. And I know Cooper Kupp's projected for not like a crazy amount of ownership, but some. But I did mention I think the field's going to be a little skittish to play him. Matt Stafford to Cooper Kupp. That's the stack of the week. That's what I'm rolling with. It's what I have the most exposure to right now. And we really have low ownership on Stafford. So that's what we're hitting on this week. So hopefully we could go 5 out of 6. I've got 4 out of the 5 stack of the weeks has been the Millie making winning stack. And this week I'm going Stafford to Kupp as my favorite stack of the week. And hopefully takes down a Millie maker again. So guys, if you haven't done it yet, do us a big favor. Like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Good luck with the NFL this week. If you want to check out any of our Black Friday deals, use those links below in the description box. Good luck this weekend.